We love our sponsors like Financial. Visit them online at ehfinancial.com. Sponsor us and we'll promote you on the show too. Email info@crowncitynews.com to learn more. Now for the morning buzz, we have that really horrific and tragic situation in Virginia with the shooting.
Right, lots of congressmen during a charity baseball game practice.
Yeah,
right. And the shooter has been identified as James Hodgkinson of Belleville, Illinois. Joining us now is LA progressive Dick Price to discuss it. Now, many people are saying that this was a liberal hate crime because the shooter apparently was a Bernie fan. Is it a hate crime on the liberal side? What's your...
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. Absolutely, the guy was a Bernie supporter. He was a nutcase on the left, and a certain group of us are going to try to make political hay out of that. You've already got people like Newt Gingrich saying it's the left-wingers are going nuts, and you can shortly expect people in Birkenstocks and little pink hats to be knocking on your door looking to rape and pillage. And if it had been another white supremacist who'd done the shooting, like the young man who killed the Bible study class in Charleston, then other people would be saying, well, it's the right-wingers that are going nuts. And we'll talk about that for a while, and ultimately, not much will come of it.
And we should say that Bernie did come out immediately and was very opposed to the violence.
Well, sure, it's pretty preposterous to think that Bernie Sanders, based on who he is and the way he campaigns and the way he treats people, that he would support that at all. And indeed, he denounced the man immediately.
Yeah, isn't this so similar? It harkens back to Gabby Giffords. And when that happened, people said it was a right-wing fanatic, and there was much ado about that. And then after a lot of investigation, it was determined there was absolutely nothing to do with it. You just had a nut job who was looking for significance. And because the shooter shot himself, or was killed, rather, we'll never really know what their, if any, association other than wanting attention. Isn't that?
Well, the Gabby Gifford case is a good one to go back to. Yes, it was a man who turned out to just have psychiatric problems. He wasn't really political at all. He shot Gabby Giffords in the face in 2011 in Tucson, killed 4 other people, some of them carrying guns at the time, weren't able to protect the Congresswoman. And since that time, 6 years, 100 bills have come forward to somehow, how can we get our arms around this gun violence? You know, could we have a national registry, a longer time, a cooling off period after you buy a gun? And of those 100, very, very few have passed. And that's what's going to happen this time. Some people are going to try to blame it on politics and left-wingers or right-wingers, and a lot of us are going to say, well, what can we do about to control this crazy gun violence? 33,000 people a year, Americans, are killed by guns. 2/3 of them suicide, 1/3 of them by murder, and a few by accident. But you know, the truth is, not much is going to happen, and it's really disconcerting. I do have some ideas of what might happen, but
well, and I think the violence in general is very concerning. We have individuals who are flagging the president with his bloody head, and interactions of blowing up the White House, and other comments that are very violent. And at what point do we say, does the media even become censored in saying, just like we have certain words that we're not allowed to use in media, are there going to be certain phrases or certain actions that are not going to be represented in the media?
well, it's certainly true. That's a part of the difference. I mean, I was a bartender many years ago, and we'd have some nutcases come in the bar and say this thing and that thing and the other thing, and the other patrons would either pay attention or punch them in the nose or ignore them altogether, but it never left the bar. Now, if you want to say something angry, if you're President Trump and you want to attack somebody, well, you tweet out 144 characters, and 20 million people know about it right away. And that builds and builds and builds, and I think that is part of the reason that we've become so divided. There is so much, and there's no gatekeepers to say, well, don't pay attention to those people, because everybody can get around it.
Social media will still be tough.
Right, and I'd love to hear what some of your ideas are, but it does bring to mind that isn't this really the yang to the idea of absolute free speech, in which you want to protect both people on both sides saying heinous things, and that's going to happen. It's part of the American lexicon, if you will. And you got the good with the bad on that. How would you respond?
Well, so what I hope, the analogy I draw is what happened to cigarette smoking. When I went off to college in 1965, everybody smoked. I looked up the percentage. It was actually only 45%. But where I was in New York City, it seemed like 145%. And nowadays, it's 15%. The government had a role, the American Cancer Society had a role, but really what happened is we as a people said, you know, that's right, smoking is a darn dumb thing to do, let's stop. I'm thinking that we may someday, by constant pressure, reach that with gun violence. We may say,
pressure.
you know, having 300 million guns, more guns than people in America, we don't need to do that. We could turn those in. We could make it hard for people with mental illness to get guns. One thing that happened out of the recent shooting is there's a strong correlation between domestic violence and mass murder. Many of the mass murderers have histories of beating up their wives and children, just as the man who did the shooting at the baseball field had.
Well, how does that square with the idea, though, that our president and a lot of conservatives are actually touting more open carry laws and an expansion of the ability for the Second Amendment?
Right, so the idea there is if the second baseman had been packing heat the other day, he could have pulled out his Luger and shot the guy before he got the first round off. Well, I'm a former combat soldier, and that isn't going to happen. Yes, indeed, if you walked up and down the street with your M16 in your hand, your finger on the trigger, you might shoot the guy first. But you'd have a heart attack from doing that 24/7. You know, if you just had a pistol on your hip, the good man with a gun to stop the bad man with a gun is baloney.
Yeah, it does happen sometimes. But so
it
anyway,
happens once in a blue moon, and occasionally an asteroid will hit your car.
Dick, how do people get a hold of you?
LAprogressive.com, and we have a website, an online social justice magazine. We're entering our 10th year.
Fascinating,
nice.
and we'll have to keep talking about this.
I know. Thank
All
you very
right,
much.
coming up, lawsuits are hurting businesses and what some are doing about that.
Exactly. California Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse is speaking up, and Mary Ann Marino joins us to tell us more about it next.